In the ancient kingdom of Lumaria, nestled among rolling hills and verdant forests, lived a craftsman named Thaddeus. Once a renowned blacksmith, his reputation had fallen into shadow after the royal sword he forged for the prince shattered during a ceremonial duel, humiliating the royal family and causing Thaddeus to be cast out from the palace. Now he worked in a small forge at the edge of the village, barely earning enough to feed himself. The villagers whispered when he passed, and children were warned not to purchase his wares. The failure, they called him, the man whose steel breaks like clay. Each night, Thaddeus would sit before his dying forge, staring into the embers that glowed like the last remnants of his dreams. On one such night, as autumn winds howled outside his workshop, an elderly traveler knocked at his door, seeking shelter from the storm. "I have little to offer," Thaddeus said, "but you may warm yourself by my forge." The traveler, wrapped in a weathered cloak, nodded gratefully. As the night deepened, Thaddeus shared his meager meal, and perhaps because of the stranger's kind eyes, or perhaps because his heart had grown heavy with unspoken words, he told the tale of his disgrace. "I tested that sword 100 times, he said, his voice hollow. "I cannot understand how it failed." The traveler listened quietly before speaking. "I once knew a potter who created the most beautiful vases in the kingdom. One day, his kiln malfunctioned, and all his masterpieces emerged cracked and ruined. Instead of lamenting, he studied those cracks and developed a technique of filling them with gold. Those once broken vases became his most treasured creations." "A pretty tale," Thaddeus replied bitterly, "but broken steel cannot be mended with gold." "Perhaps not," the traveler agreed. "But failure is merely knowledge you didn't possess before. The question is, what will you forge from that knowledge?" Those words kept Thaddeus awake long after. The traveler had departed the next morning. For the first time since his disgrace, he felt a spark ignite within him, not of angry defiance, but of quiet determination. He began to examine the fragments of his failed royal sword, which he had kept as a reminder of his shame. He studied the crystalline structure of the broken metal under different lights, tested it with various tools, and consulted ancient texts of metallurgy that he had neglected in his prior confidence. Weeks turned into months. The villagers still whispered, but Thaddeus no longer heard them. His focus had turned inward, to the puzzle of his greatest failure. He discovered that the ore from the royal mines contained minute impurities that, when heated in a specific way, created hidden weaknesses in the metal. Working by candlelight, he developed a new forging technique that required the metal to be heated, folded, and cooled in a precise pattern that eliminated these weaknesses. Each failure became a lesson. Each broken attempt revealed another secret. One spring morning, almost a year after the traveler's visit, Thaddeus completed a blade unlike any he had forged before. It gleamed with a pattern like flowing water, strong yet somehow fluid, rigid yet resilient. He named this new method phoenix forging, after the mythical bird that rises from its own ashes. Word spread slowly at first: a farmer whose plow didn't break in the rocky soil, a huntsman whose knife maintained its edge through an entire season. Then came the soldiers, seeking blades that wouldn't fail them in battle. When the kingdom found itself threatened by marauders from the north, the royal armorer came to Thaddeus's door. "The army needs weapons that will not fail," he said, not quite meeting Thaddeus's gaze. "The king has heard of your new method." Thaddeus could have refused, could have savored the sweet taste of vindication. Instead, he simply nodded. "I will need more space and apprentices to teach." Within a fortnight, Thaddeus returned to the royal forge, this time not as a servant, but as a master craftsman. The weapons he created helped turn the tide of battle, and the technique he developed became legendary throughout the realm. Years later, when apprentices asked him the secret of his success, Thaddeus would show them a fragment of that first broken sword, kept not as a reminder of shame, but as his most valued possession. "This failure was my greatest teacher," he would tell them. "In breaking, it showed me what I could not see in wholeness. Remember this: we are not defined by our failures, but by what we build from their ruins." The kingdom's soldiers, armed with phoenix-forged weapons, proved victorious against the northern marauders. In recognition of his service, the king honored Thaddeus in a formal ceremony, elevating him to the status of master craftsman of the realm. With royal resources at his disposal, Thaddeus built a magnificent forge that combined his innovative techniques with the finest materials available. Under his guidance, a new generation of smiths learned the art of phoenix forging. And in time, the sigil of Thaddeus's forge became a phoenix rising from a broken sword, a reminder that from the ashes of our greatest disappointments can rise our most magnificent achievements. As he grew older, Thaddeus compiled his knowledge in journals, recording not just the technical aspects of his craft, but also the philosophical lessons he had learned through his journey from disgrace to mastery. Thaddeus's legacy spread far beyond the kingdom of Lumaria. Smiths traveled from distant lands to learn his technique, and the phoenix-forged metals became known throughout the world for their unmatched quality and strength. But more than the metal itself, it was the story of Thaddeus, the man who transformed failure into his greatest triumph, that inspired generations to view their own disappointments not as endings, but as the first sparks of something extraordinary waiting to be forged. If this story lit a spark in you, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of resilience, redemption, and the fire within.